Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. We're going to let people come into the webinar as we start having people log on and flood in. So we'll just give it a few seconds here. I hope everyone's weather is pleasant where they are. I know the country's experiencing a lot of different weather patterns right now, so hopefully it's pleasant where you are. Okay, we can get started. So welcome. We are so excited to have really a couple of stellar panelists today for this webinar. Just before we get started, want to make sure that you're aware we do have closed captioning and a live transcript available today for this webinar. In the bottom ribbon of Zoom in your window, there's a CC button, closed captioning, and you should be able to push that and get oh, we do, sorry. Somebody put in the chat that hope people in New England are staying safe from the incoming hurricane. Yes, I agree. It's varied here in the impact. So you can do closed captioning and also transcript if you'd like. And in the Q&A, there is a Q&A. We will be having an opportunity at the end of the webinar to answer your questions and get to as many as possible. Thank you for those who also added some questions when you were signing up for the webinar. So this webinar is brought to you by Winston College, in where we offer personalized one-to-one academic support services for students with LDs anywhere in the nation, in any higher education program. Winston College is part of the Winston Preparatory School network of campuses, both our brick and mortar and our online campus as well. So with that being said, we will hop in, hopefully. Let's see. Oh, I'm not sure why I cannot. There we go. Okay. So introductions today. I'll tell you a little bit about our panelists. First, we have Dr. David Parker. He is a post-secondary disability specialist and ADD life coach at CRG in Indianapolis, Indiana. He earned a PhD in special education, post-secondary programming at the University of Connecticut. He's also the program manager for research, educational outreach, and communications at the Gregory S. Oh, I don't get this wrong. Correct me, David. Furbach Center. And he has 3 decades of work with students with LDs, ADHD, and ASD, which have included his position as a high school special education teacher, director of a private school for students with dyslexia, administrator of an LD ADHD programs at UNC Chapel Hill and at UConn, a program manager of the National Science Foundation, a grant project at Washington University in St. Louis. He has conducted training also on best practices for college students with ADHD, LD, and ASD in Italy, Japan, Australia, and Kuwait. Dr. Parker has helped conduct the first national study of ADD college coaching through Wayne State University, a board member of 3 peer-reviewed journals, and former executive director of a HEADS Journal of Post-Secondary Education and Disability. Dr. Parker is the co-author of numerous research articles, book chapters, and 3 books, including Becoming Self-Determined, which we'll be talking about today, Creating Thoughtful Learners in Standardized-Driven Admissions Frenzied Culture. So welcome, Dr. Parker. Thank you so much for being here. Extensive scholar in these areas. We're thrilled to have you. Fern Bork is an Assistant Director of Admissions and Training Coordinator for Landmark College, which is a 4-year liberal arts college in Putney, Vermont, devoted exclusively to students who learn differently. Fern never planned to work in higher education. However, after parenting a son who has ADHD, she changed courses. And we'll hear about that. During the years, Aaron, her son, was at Landmark College earning his associate degree. Fern formed a deep connection with to the college, and 5 years after he graduated, Fern joined the Landmark College admissions team. Currently, she works with college counselors, independent education consultants, families, and students, sharing her parent and admissions perspectives. She'll be sharing today. In 2020, she created a webinar, Navigating the College Search for Students Who Learn Differently, which she's presented and does present to schools, organizations, parent groups, and professional conferences nationwide. Thank you, Fern. Welcome. We're so thrilled that you're here as well. So we'll be discussing kind of 4 main topics today. And we'll have Fern and also David jumping in. They have sections that they'll be presenting as well. So we'll jump right in. The first, so the first topic that we're going to talk about is an action model of self-determination. So what it is and how it applies. So Dr. Parker, take it away.
Tabitha, thank you again for a warm welcome, and I'm just thrilled to be working with you and Fern today. And thank you everybody for joining us. We hope that this is helpful and timely information to support you, regardless of how you're joining the conversation. We do want to talk about self-determination first because it seems like it is an evidence-based, research-based model for promoting successful adult outcomes in all human beings, but it has been particularly research-based as being an effective way to help young adults with various types of disabilities launch into adulthood. So since we're looking today really at the transition to higher education and all that goes with that, you know, leaving home, learning how to do your own laundry, problem solving your way, we wanted to give you a little bit of a framework by talking about self-determination. This work that my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Sharon Field, her husband, Alan Hoffman, and colleagues developed at Wayne State University came out of some national research in the 80s and 90s. And in looking at what happened to students with disabilities after high school, there was a lot of good news, but there was also a lot of bad news. The bad news was that far too many of those young adults, having received various types of supports in high school for their disability, failed to launch after they left high school. And through lots of thousands of interviews, a central theme was from each of those young adults, hey, my mom, my dad, my teachers, my coaches, I know they meant well. They were trying to help me, but they did too much for me. I respect the fact that they maybe didn't want me to fail or be frustrated, but they minimized my expectations. They sort of took over too often. And again, I get why they did it, and I thank them. But the message that I internalized from that environmental message over time was that I'm not really capable. And so it really thwarted my own development of the skills and confidence I need to set goals and work toward them, and to learn to be comfortable with uncomfort, you know, to get comfortable failing at times, and you know, learning from those mistakes, as we all have a right to do over time in order to learn and grow. So that's really the basis for this action model of self-determination, and similar models of self-determination that have been used. I first learned about it during my dissertation research at the University of Connecticut. That's how I met Dr. Field, and have used this sense and the instruments that they developed to measure self-determination in a number of studies after that. So let's just go through it quickly so we all have a basic framework. The link that is in this slide will take you to a wonderful website, To Be Self-Determined, that Sharon created, and you'll see more information about this and other tools and readings and research and videos and just tons of wonderful resources about how we can promote self-determination in anybody, but including young adults with disabilities on the website that you see listed there. The action model itself begins with two foundational traits that we want to build up in everybody we get a chance to work with: self-awareness and self-esteem. So knowing yourself in your context at the top left is really that accurate self-awareness. And this is all about when I want to achieve goals, how do I go about doing that successfully? So knowing yourself in your context helps us promote accurate self-awareness. We help young people. What are your dreams? What are your goals? What do you know about yourself? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How will your disability particularly impact you as you prepare to go off to college? And what might you do about that? Valuing yourself is also that other key foundational basis for being self-determined. Valuing yourself is really self-esteem, believing in yourself, believing in your right to achieve important and meaningful outcomes in your life, knowing that it's okay to ask for help, that doesn't mean I'm not working hard or that I'm less than or not independent. It means that I'm learning to be a good consumer of helpful resources and to be interdependent and to build really meaningful relationships with people who care about me and can support my growth and progress. So based on those two foundational traits, the action model then helps us understand that our role is to help young people develop plans for achieving their goals, considering their options. What are your resources again? How long might this take? What do you want that outcome to look like? What help might you need along the way? As the person then begins to enact that plan, they engage in action. We want them then to work toward their goals. But we also want them to anticipate and learn how to be resilient if the plan doesn't go according to plan, right? We all know that there are times when what we thought was going to be an easy step maybe turned out to be more difficult or challenging, or circumstances change and we had to alter our plans. So the action phase is where we're supporting young people in being, again, adaptable and resilient as they self-monitor the implementation of their plan along the way. That might be for a few days, it might be for a few weeks, it might be for an entire semester, it might be across their entire time in higher education. But we can come in as agents of the environment to support them in self-monitoring how this is going and to encourage them to keep going without taking over. Fern's going to talk more about that a little bit later. I'm really excited to hear her talk more about the difference between rescuers and helpers. A final stage, though, of this action cycle is at the bottom: experience outcomes and learn. In my own work, the last 25 years of coaching high school and college students with disabilities, what I realize is that young people are often so busy that they're either doing or posting on social media or sleeping, and that's kind of it. I like to say that the best time college students have to reflect on their experiences is called winter break, once the semester is over, right? But along the way, what we also want to do as supportive agents of the environment to support young people's self-determination, meaning their ability to achieve their own goals, using their own tools and their own talents and their own strengths, their own intrinsic motivation, is to help them reflect on those experiences. How did that go? What did you learn from that? Would you do anything differently next time? Notice that I'm modeling, not telling them what I think they should do, but I'm inviting them to pause and reflect on their own insights and share them with me so I can sort of help hold those. I can sort of be an archivist with a teenager, a son, a daughter, a student, so that later when they're trying then to be self-determined with similar activities or goals in the future, they begin to build a really accurate library of self. You know, what did I learn last time? How did that go for me? What do I want to repeat? What do I want to avoid? How can I do a better job of that this time? I mentioned intrinsic motivation. I just want to link this. Ryan and Desi are the last names of two professors at the University of Rochester. They have also done phenomenal research on self-determination. And they really sort of frame it as an aspect of intrinsic motivation. And their research has found that there are three traits all of us as human beings really share. They call them drives. And they are drives to be autonomous, to be competent, and for relatedness, for connections with other people. Autonomous means freedom to make choices. Competence means belief and skills to get the job done. Relatedness, again, is engaging in nurturing, meaningful, caring relationships that support us without taking over. And so this action model is very linked to Ryan and Desi's research on self-determination. And again, all of that research tells us that particularly for young people with disabilities, they are going to experience much more positive adult outcomes when we are working with them to promote their self-determination. Research has found, for example, that people who are more self-determined, who have disabilities, tend to have higher GPAs in school, tend to find and keep jobs more easily, tend to do better financially, starting with keeping and maintaining bank accounts. They tend to live more independently. More recent research that unfortunately has become even more relevant for all of us, there's a strong correlation between being self-determined and having good mental health. So anyway, thank you for taking a moment to just sort of look at some research frameworks with me. You'll also notice as I turn this back over to Tabitha, that those of you who are familiar with the Winston Online or Winston Prep model, both of which are so impressive to me as such excellent examples of that combination of research and practice, that what we're going to hear about next more, I think, from Tabitha, looking at the continuous feedback cycle and also the qualities of sustainable and independent learners that is central to the Winston model. That's also very closely connected to this work. So I hope that gives us a foundation that's meaningful for further discussion today. Thanks, Tabitha.
Thank you so much. As David mentioned, I'm not going to go over the continuous feedback cycle today, but I will put a link in along with other resources in the email, the follow-up email that I send to everybody. But we will be going over the qualities of a sustainable and independent learner, which parlays, as you said so nicely, with the work that we're doing and the framework that you've just presented. What I'd like to do right now is talk about lessons learned from a parent's perspective. So I will hand it over to Fern to talk about her experiences and as a parent, and now working with parents, educators, really across the nation. So take it away, Fern.
Thank you so much, Tabitha. And it's so interesting to me, David, listening to you speak, because we come from slightly different perspectives, but we land in the same place. So I am going to talk about a deeply personal version of that self-determination model that you were just speaking of. I will start by telling you all a little bit more about Aaron, and in the process, you will learn a lot more about me. Aaron is my only child. He is now 30 years old, so he is a young man. He was diagnosed with ADHD at a fairly early age, but the challenges that presented didn't really come to the fore until he was in high school, and the homework demands had increased exponentially because Aaron takes information in pretty readily. His difficulty is in the output part of that process. Getting homework done at all, let alone on time. He's a gifted writer, but initiating a piece of writing could be a painful process in our house. And planning for a long-term project, that was simply something he wasn't then capable of. So I did what many parents in my position have done before and continue to do. I wanted to support him, and I didn't want him to fail. A little bit more about that later. So I became very involved in his education. With hindsight being 2020, I would now tell you I became over involved in his education. What that looked like in our house was he would get home from school at the end of the day. I would give him a long break, but then I would sit him down and watch over him to make sure that the homework got done. And I did that day after day, night after night. You can imagine how popular a parent I was, not so much. But it wasn't until he was a junior, asking to explore colleges like all of his friends were, that I had this horrific moment in which I realized what I had done. I had essentially become Aaron's executive function. And in doing that, I had ensured that he would never have the opportunity to develop any skill in that arena on his own. So in that moment, I also knew that he was going to need an incredible amount of support if he was going to succeed in college. We were fortunate. We found Landmark College, and from the morning I sat in an open house, I knew I was in the right place. Aaron, on the other hand, was not as easily convinced, but long story short, in the end, he chose Landmark to begin his journey into higher ed. Aaron learned a great deal while he was at Landmark, and so did I. And I would often joke with people that he was a much quicker learner than I was. So what is it that I learned while Aaron was at Landmark? The first thing I found I needed to learn was patience. I learned that the road from A to B is not a straight line. It curves, it winds, it has hills and it has valleys, and that's the way it should be. There is also no timetable. Each one of us is unique, and we develop on our very own unique timetable. So having expectations about time will lead parents to incredible frustration and anxiety. Getting back to failure, for the first time, I started to understand that failure is valuable. We all learn such an incredible amount from our failures, especially if they happen in a setting that is supportive and helps us move beyond that failure to figure out appropriate and effective next steps. Emerging research tells us that the cognitive traits we group under the heading of neurodivergence represent adaptive strengths in many contexts: the arts, business, STEM, and technology fields. That doesn't minimize the challenges they also present, but in the right setting, with the right support, these same traits can enable students to flourish and contribute in ways that traditional learners may not. And Aaron was in the right setting with the right support. He had the support of peers, an incredible advisor, faculty and staff who understood and could help support him as he moved forward on that very curvy road. You know, for the first time at Landmark, Aaron failed classes. He had never done that before, but that was to be expected rather, as he learned to develop independence and learned what it is to develop the skills and strategies he needed to succeed. Landmark also taught Aaron the value of introspection. For the first time, he learned to look inward, and he discovered who he was, what he valued, what he wanted to do and be in this world. What an incredible, incredible gift. The other, perhaps most significant thing I learned as a parent is how to step back. And that is the hardest thing I have ever done and continue to learn how to do. Neurodivergent young people in particular have had, I think, generally speaking, less opportunity to develop independence than their neurotypical peers. So college should be the time when we stand back as parents, let them move into the driver's seat. We become passengers. It's time to move from being a rescuer, which I certainly was throughout Aaron's education, right up till he got to Landmark, into becoming a helper. a helper who will help your student, your child, learn what resources are available to them and then seek those out and use those. Landmark College's counseling team has created a really helpful piece called Helpers versus Rescuers. Tabitha will be supplying you all with that after our webinar today. But it's good. It's a good guide for learning how to move into that role. And while your stomach, you may feel like there's a pit in your stomach the whole time you're doing this, the rewards are incredible. First thing is it improved my relationship with my son. For the first time, I became just mom instead of homework queen and a lot of other less flattering things I had been called. The other thing I want to tell you is support is available to all of you as well. And you should be sure to avail yourself of all support is available. Seek out what you need, because this transition is not just a transition for your student. It's really a whole family transition.
Thank you, Fern.
Sure.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And I really think that it's so important that all of what you said, and especially this, the last piece, that it really is a family experience transition, and raising a family, raising children, forming those relationships, and then those relationships change as we all grow older and our children transition into next phases of their life. Those relationships change, and there's not a lot of discussion about what parents go through and how to what resources are out there for parents, and really just that discussion. So we wanted to be able to bring your story. I'm sure that many of the participants, parents who are watching this webinar can relate to a lot of things that you said. So we have just we have a few minutes left before Q&A. So wanted to give Dr. Parker a chance just to, if you have any comments or thoughts on what Fern just spoke about. I want to give you a couple minutes just to feel free to make a comment.
Sure. I would just compliment you so much, Fern, on not only what you've done, but how you describe it. But full disclosure, I'm not a parent. I've worked with young people for 25 years, and I work closely with families too. I've come to appreciate from a non-parent perspective how much pressure society really puts on families to get this right, to get young people into a good school, to launch them. And I watch how parents struggle to not only navigate their own feelings of not wanting their son or daughter to struggle, but also how to show up as members of a neighborhood, a community, a church, a synagogue, an organization, and hear other parents talking about what they're doing to help their son or daughter get into a good school and launch. And I've come to appreciate how intense that pressure can be. Just very quickly, I'll end here with an anecdote. Last week, I met online with a young man who's a junior in high school and his parents. And I'd coached him in the spring, but hadn't seen him for a few months. So they were back on screen. We were, reconnecting and clarifying what they had engaged my services for at this point. And mom and dad are both college graduates. They have advanced degrees. They're both professionals, wonderfully educated people. Their son is neurodivergent, but planning on studying engineering in college. Again, just started his junior year. And mom reminded me of these pressures when she began the conversation by saying, all of my friends are talking about what they're doing with their sons and daughters to get them into college. And I think we're woefully behind. And I'm just scared to death that we haven't done enough. And I said, well, what are you expecting your son to be doing at the beginning of his junior year? She said, well, we haven't visited all the colleges. We haven't made a choice yet. He's now not sure about his major. He's only taking the SAT once, and the litany went on. And I just went, wow, 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 wow. Oh my gosh, the tension was palpable. My advice was take a deep breath respectfully and realize, you've got 2 years to keep working on all of these transition plans and decisions and information gathering, let me help you all as a family break that down into some doable steps where you don't feel overwhelmed to get all that done at once. And I said, if you can let go of what you're hearing your friends say and do, that might help you just focus on your son and his unique needs. So also, Fern, as you said, I think that developmental sequence often looks different and maybe takes longer with a lot of young people with neurodivergence. And I find that all the time. And if we can support families in taking a deep breath and realizing we need to focus on what our son or daughter needs to be happy and successful and fulfilled. And that's not necessarily what the script looks like for everybody else. If parents can find a way to sort of disconnect from all the ways that society says, nope, this is the treadmill, this is the one sort of path that everybody's supposed to follow to be successful, that just creates so much more anxiety in families when they're taking those messages as gospel, rather than as examples of what works for some people, but not necessarily for their son or daughter. I have found that the work goes better and the ultimate choices end up being much more meaningful for the young person who's involved. So I couldn't underscore what you have taught us this morning, Fern, from all my years of experience as a provider, but not as a parent.
Thank you. It's what we're talking about here, is these self development, personal development skills that really are academic skills as well, but we don't talk about them in that way. I think usually it's reading, writing, math. Of course we want our students to be able to do all of that, and what we have found at Winston Prep, that what is important, what helps to create that space for a student to be able to maximize their learning and their learning time, is that at the same time, these developmental skills really need attention and need to be developed, and that's the key, right? It happens over time. So we'll also talk about those skills. I want to just reference our model for we have 8 domains, and we consider those the QSIL, it's the qualities of a sustainable and independent learner. I need to share my screen. I did shut that down, but if you, one moment, and I'll do that again. Did I? Uh-oh. I think I actually permanently close that out. Okay, I'll send that to people. But basically what we have is 8 interconnecting kind of circles, and it's executive function, so time management, organization, resilience, communication, really knowing yourself. And all of these 8 domains, really, we've been doing longitudinal studies at Winston Prep for quite some time on our students' outcomes, and also on our teaching. And so we found that with students, really their ability to be able to, some people, we can also call it emotional learning as well, social emotional learning. And so if we really focus on those areas at the same time that we're focusing on these kind of hard skills, academic skills, that'll actually sometimes be more important than those reading and writing, or definitely we want to combine that effort. And there's skills that matter. And so we find that when students have high ability in these 8 domains and the SEL, the self-determination, then they do academically better. But they also have a sense of life fulfillment as well. And that's something that much of the research does not cover in depth, is that life fulfillment part. And that's really what we want, right? We want those sustainable and independent learners, and both in academics, but also throughout their lifespan into employment, and whatever they choose to do after that. So Fern, I just want to open it up to both of you. Fern and David, do you have any comments that you'd like to share? Please feel free.
Well, what I'm finding remarkable about this morning, though not entirely surprising, is that we all come from different backgrounds, but our thinking converges. We end up in the same place. So when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about it, Tabitha, in terms of the soft skills needed, which is really what you've been talking about, and David, what you spoke about also today. So I focused on the whole idea of self-awareness. When I am working with students and with families, the impulse is to look at this college journey as an outer journey, and you gather all this information about all of these institutions. It's not where I ask people to start. I ask students to begin it as an inner journey towards greater self-awareness, on a path towards self-discovery. And I want them to be asking themselves the really important questions. Who am I? Why am I going to college? What do I want to get out of that experience? What are my strengths and my challenges? Now, almost every neurodivergent student I speak to can tell me at length about their areas of challenge or whatever they consider their weaknesses. But so few are able to talk to me about their strengths, about the talents and gifts they bring to bear. And it's those very gifts that they are going to need to leverage to meet the challenges that their learning differences are going to present throughout their lives. It won't stop at the end of college or academia. It goes on. So I want them to understand those strengths. I ask them to really think about what setting do they flourish in? What kind of environment do they want to be in? What kind of learner they are? If you know how you learn, you can start to, with support, develop the skills and strategies that will lead to success. And this final, piece of the self-awareness journey, I ask them to really land on what supports do they need to maximize their opportunity to succeed. And that's not just true in the college setting. That's equally true beyond college as they approach their careers. So I think of the skill being the skill of introspection, of going inside and finding out who they are, developing self-confidence. Neurodivergent individuals are less likely to be really confident. They may have been made to feel less than. I think, David, you used those exact words earlier. Made to feel as though they're broken. Somehow they need fixing. Nothing could be further from the truth. They need to develop the self-confidence in which they can dream and know that they have the ability to achieve those dreams. It really helps, I think, to be in a setting like Landmark, where neurodiversity is valued and recognized for the myriad of ways it contributes to society and all of humankind. All of the self-awareness then needs to be paired with motivation, self-motivation. Why are you going to college? Is it something you want to do? Is it something your parents expect of you? That self-motivation is important, whether, again, we're talking about academia, whether we're talking about career. So it's the combining of, for me, of the motivation and the self-awareness that provides the skills to succeed academically, but also to have a happy, fulfilling life. And I will say that as a parent, one of the things I know I have in common with all parents is that we all want our kids to be happy and fulfilled.
What I'll just quickly add to that, if I may, is I also prepared some resources, and Tabitha, again, thank you. I know you're going to send those out to all of our participants. In addition to resources on self-determination that you'll find there, I've also got a section on coaching teens with neurodiversity, and you might find that helpful as well, particularly if you're a parent or a teacher. Coaching uses questioning that might on the surface look like therapy. You know, we know that counselors tend to ask questions rather than tell and give advice too. But coaching questions are not therapeutic questions. They're questions designed to trigger the reflection, the introspection that you're talking about, Fern. Coaches kind of serve as external executive functioning developers. And when we ask students short, open-ended questions, what do you need to learn more about your choices? What would be the best way for you to make that decision? Do you have all the information you need to feel confident about the next step? Those are just some examples of a brief, open-ended question. If we can discipline ourselves as parents or teachers or caregivers to use that kind of verbal interaction with our teens, our young people, our students, again, first of all, we notice we're not giving them advice any longer. We're not rescuing them. We're not telling them what we think they should do or how we handled it. We're asking them questions and then we're leaning in with curiosity and we give them time to think about it. Some of the best questions I've ever asked students I've coached have ended with the student looks at me and says, I don't know. I've never thought about that. And I said, great. I invite you to think about that tonight. And would you mind texting me tomorrow if any thoughts come up? I'd love to hear what comes up. So we don't have to have an answer right now, but if we shift more, maybe using some of those resources in the handouts and videos there to how to really kind of coach our teens, what we do is we put them in the driver's seat, as Fern was talking about, right? But we instill in them that capacity to become self-determined, independent learners, like Tabitha was just describing, to teach them, you know, whatever the current crisis is, whatever the current decision that we feel like has to be answered by 5 o'clock today, anxiety, tension, you know, we're slaves to a clock. If we can learn to step back and say, this is a longer process. And the bigger process, no matter what the current decision or crisis is, really, what I'm trying to do here is to engage my team in that reflection and information gathering and decision making that matches who they are. That really does speak to who am I? What do I want? Why am I going to college? What is my dream here? That would be one thing I would add. The other thing I would add, though, is that knowledge is power. And I found I do career assessments at CRG. Most campuses, career centers do career assessments as well. I have found that college students I work with who've gone through a career assessment, which usually teaches them more about their personality type. I use the Myers-Briggs like most people do, but also then we use the STRONG, which looks at jobs and work environments and careers. When students that I work with have done a career assessment like that and have a lot of data that's helping them clarify what might I end up doing for a living that would be meaningful and likely to succeed based on all this data. So once they have that end goal, and then maybe also work with a really good advisor in college, perhaps with that information, to figure out not only a major, a minor, but to put together an academic plan, right? And you don't start college with that, but even starting your first semester, you can begin to do that if you build a relationship with a good advisor, with the career services, with a professor who's teaching a class that you get really excited about. Once we not only support our students in making decisions for themselves, but also help them access information like a career assessment or a good advisor who's going to help them think about majors. And they begin to put that plan together. Where am I going with this? What's this going to look like? How can I launch a career after college? What I found is that once students have that information and it makes sense to them and they like it and they agree with it and they see how it's grounded and who am I, boy, college really becomes not now this drudgery of all these classes I have to take that I don't really like. College becomes, well, I'm getting there. See, the reason I'm taking these classes is because I'm going here. I'll also put in a plug for work experience, whether it's paid or unpaid, volunteer, throughout high school, summer breaks in particular, but even if time permits during school, I know that's a big if, and during college, summer, winter breaks, internships, the more hands-on experience these young people have doing things that help them figure out What am I going to be good at? Why am I going to college? How is that helping me get this career launch that I'm suddenly excited about because I've had a taste of it? Then again, so many daily hassles and headaches and decisions and arguments about homework and studying for tests and lining up my accommodations for the Disability Services Office gets contextualized into this larger, meaningful, personalized path or journey that our teens are on, or young people are on, where they realize this has an end goal that I want. Until I know where this is going and why I'm doing all of this, it just feels like a lot of tedious drudgery and stuff that my parents are on my back about that's really hard for me to manage from an executive functioning standpoint. So I also encourage to do what you can when you can to help students learn how to make their own decisions, but also to use their resources to get more information about end goals that are meaningful to them. And then college fits into that path in a much more personalized and meaningful way.
Thank you. I love that. I think you make some excellent points, and this is really a journey for a student, and there's skills that are developed over time. So starting early and giving students the experience over time, I think is incredibly important. And that's one of the things that I hear you saying, one of the messages. And I talk a lot about, when we're trying to figure out how to support students in higher ed, which is a huge conversation, multifaceted conversation. But one of the things that in the self-reflection is having students be able to identify the difference between something that's transactional and transformational. And just that idea, working with that idea, what are some examples of transaction would be maybe a tutor just to get through the class, right? We're going to go in, and accommodations are very important. We want to make sure that we set those up way in advance, over the summertime before we transition into a program. But those are more transactional, and we need those transactions. But to be able to use the resources, okay, that's a transaction, but combined, when a student is able to identify those resources, that part's the transformation. And to view, when a student is moving from a K through 12 environment into a higher ed environment, it's all new. So they're rediscovering. If they're working on skills, they often don't know the skills that they need when they're in college, and they discover that. So being able to also identify what program and who can help me in this transformational journey, because I'm still on it, right? We often think like, I'm going to get through that class. I'm just going to get through the class. I'm going to get the degree. But it's so much more than that. It's really about transformation. So I think that both of you really spoke to that. We have a couple more minutes, and then we're going to get to some questions. Just wanted to give some time and space in case you have just a couple of thoughts about that.
Fern, does anything come to mind?
Well, the one thing that comes to mind for me is that there are different levels of support available to students in college. It doesn't look anything like it did in high school, but there is choice according to what kind of college you select. So colleges are all required by the ADA, by the Americans with Disabilities Act, to provide accommodations, which provide access to students who are qualified for admission. But I view those accommodations as very transactional. They may be things like additional time for test taking, or a reduced distraction environment for test taking. They allow the student to succeed in the moment. But I look more towards how do students build skills that will serve them, not just in college, because those same skills are skills they're going to be using all of their lives. So I guide students and families to understand that there are colleges that also offer some coordinated services, like perhaps study skills classes in addition to accommodations. There are more and more colleges and universities in the country that are traditional colleges, but have within them structured programs of learning support that focus on skill building, those very skills that we're talking about that I believe are transformational. And then the most supportive skill building colleges, there's a group of two. Landmark College is one of them, Beacon College is the other. These are two traditional liberal arts colleges in terms of curriculum, but they are devoted exclusively to neurodivergent students. All accommodations and beyond access kinds of support are embedded in the natural teaching and the very functioning of these colleges. So choosing a level of support that's appropriate for the particular student is key. I favor, skill building types of programs because I think the impact of that is lifelong.
Here,
Yeah.
quick example, I'll add to that before we open for questions. I realized in adulthood, once I'd started my career, before I really learned about self-determination, that one of the most valuable lessons I learned in life was the summer between my junior and senior year in high school. And this will sound odd, but the summer job I got that summer was as a groundskeeper at a big cemetery here in Indianapolis. It paid well. I like to work outdoors. I needed to get some work boots for the job though. So I did so. I bought them on my own. I didn't shop very well. Turns out they didn't fit well. I didn't keep the receipt. They were giving me blisters, yada, yada, yada. So I happened to mention to my mom, I was complaining about the boots. And she said, well, take them back. Exchange them. Well, I didn't keep the receipt. Well, I never done that before. Well, I didn't know how to advocate for myself, particularly without the receipt. And she said, get in the car. Let's go to the shoe store. Bring your boots. So in a way, by asking my permission, can she model for me? I let her take the lead, and I needed her to take the lead in dealing with the salesperson at the shoe store, who initially heard I wanted to return the boots and asked for the receipt. I'm like, yep, see, we're done. I didn't keep the receipt. Thanks anyway for your time, Mom. Come on, let's leave. Quit bothering this nice lady. And Mom modeled what self-advocacy looked like. Of course, she stayed very pleasant, but she very quickly was wanting to speak to the manager. Long story short, got the boots exchanged, did a better job of getting them fitted, and I ended up with the boots that I wanted. But the larger thing that I ended up with was the opportunity to see what self-advocacy looks like. And so, not knowing at the time that Mom was modeling a very important life skill for me. What are my needs? How do I use my resources? How do I ask for what I need? How do I manage that? How do other people do that? What does that look like? Turns out that it doesn't matter what the actual specific need is, but that deeper understanding skill set of how do we negotiate for what we need and want? How do we learn to do that? How can parents model that? Or how can parents engage in conversation with us where we're debriefing with them on other examples of that quality, that ability to self-advocate successfully, whether it's getting your boots exchanged or putting together some accommodations with a professor who seems a little resistant, or negotiating with your roommate who's up all night, texting with friends and making it hard for you to get some sleep now. Whatever it is, what we want to do whenever possible is to just keep teaching young people how to get their boots exchanged. And so, you can be models of how you do that. You can help your sons or daughters debrief on that and talk about what they learned from that example in a way that they will take to college and into adulthood, right? I hope that example is meaningful. It just popped into my head. Forgive me, it was a little too personal.
I loved it.
I did too. I thought it was wonderful. I think the sharing our personal experiences are very rich, and probably I'm sure resonate with a lot of people. It definitely did with me. And I think about, as a parent myself and a parent of older children, really thinking about this in an ongoing way, when they're young, but in that transition as they get older and even into adulthood, those relationships change, and it's still a part of like modeling and encouraging and asking questions. So I think it probably doesn't end, and that journey is so for both the student and the child and also the parent. We have a lot of questions about accommodations and while they're in college, and what accommodations are available for different types of disabilities. I have a thought on that. I'll share it, and then if you have any comments, David, I'd love to hear yours. I think that one of the things that's really important and really is parlays nicely into what we've been talking about is that it's all about the manifestations, right? We really want to focus on what the manifestations of one's disability is. And then from there, we can start problem solving with what type of accommodations, how we can change the environment to help the student and give the student access to equal access to their education. So I would encourage folks to be very focused on the manifestations of one's disability and what's going on for them, and then think about actually what particular accommodation is going to be needed. So if you have any comments on that, that was, I think, to try to answer all of those questions, are multifaceted, but.
And I wish we had more time. I'm reading all the
Yeah.
comments and you all are asking great questions. I'm sorry, we're not going to have time to sort of nail each person's situation and question. We hope today has given you sort of a broad framework of mindset and tools and goals and examples that you can then maybe customize to your particular family's situation. I would agree with what you just said completely, Tabitha, but I would also tie it to something Fern said and reinforce it, that when we look at impact of disability in a college setting, for example, part of it is definitely to understand the challenges and the needs, but part of it too is to understand the gifts and to celebrate the strengths that also emerge. A lot of times we find that these young people lack motivation, but when you unpack that, it's because what they've been told and shown over the years is you can't do this and you can't do that, and you didn't do this particularly well. So no wonder they begin to lose a desire to try something, because their experiences have taught them, I'm probably going to fail at this before I even start. So a strengths-based approach, coaching, is one example. The two books Sharon Field and I co-authored on self-determination that are available to you as paperbacks. You'll see them identified in the resource section as well. Both books have one chapter in particular for families and parents. So that would be a way to learn a little bit more about specifically how do I do this. But when we help students accurately assess their needs and their challenges, yes, but we also remind and encourage and support them to bring their strengths to that too. Then when they go to ask for help or explore their options, they can think about viable solutions they're willing to try and help, like accommodations they're maybe prepared to ask for, but to do so with dignity, to express those needs and requests and goals from a strengths-based place. Not, I can't read very well because of my dyslexia. Can I please get audio books? Becomes instead, I'm a voracious reader. My print disability maybe changes how I need to access that reading, but I love getting a hold of new ideas. And so I'm talking to you today about how to get my audio text ordered, because I can't wait to dive into the readings, but we'll need it to be in that format before I can comfortably do that. When we encourage young people to express their needs from that perspective, they're more willing to do it, because they don't feel embarrassed. They don't feel like they're bothering somebody. They don't feel less than. And we begin to see that their intrinsic motivation and their self-advocacy begins to flourish, right? So I hope that that framework that connects both identifying your needs, but also honoring your own strengths and learning how to present both when we network with the environment and seek resources and help from that environment. Let's keep working on that with our young people too, and teaching them how to do that in a way that honors their dignity and allows them to feel okay, if not good, about being active consumers of all the resources that are available to them in college.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you. When we, in just the last minute, we're running out of time. One of the things that we, but I wanted to make sure to get it in prior to the webinar starting, we had discussed was also being okay with having a disability and actually talking about it around the dinner table. Fern, you really talked about that too, embracing that that fact. And you know, and also knowing yourself, knowing, being exposed to and seeing your documentation and your psychoed evals, and really being able to understand them yourself, and also so that you can explain what you need and why you need that to others that need to know. Maybe it's disability services, it's professional, whoever it is that comes in your life, that's really important. So I just wanted to make sure to mention that. And with that, we are out of time. I wish that we had another hour together, because I think this was a very very insightful conversation, and appreciate both of you, Fern and Dr. Parker, for your bringing your experience and your perspectives to us and our audience. And we hope that you've all in the audience have found this helpful. I'll again send many links to resources that Fern has talked about, and also that Dr. Parker has spoken about, and also our Winston College and Winston Preparatory School, the models that we use that really do parlay into what we were talking about here today with self-determination. So thank you all so much, and look forward to seeing everybody hopefully in our next webinar, which is going to be in a couple of months. So again, Dr. Parker and Fern, thank you so much, and please enjoy your day, the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.